Today we will read Dr. K.C.V. and 10 Commandments of Sri Ramchandra's Rajayoga. The world is in the throes of a new birth. A new pattern of culture is emerging. The ways of science have paved the way for the reorientation of human aims and goals. Though men are presently thinking in terms of better ways of existence for all and have been forced to conceive of life as a whole and not as for oneself and a few, yet the means and methods adopted for arriving at that goal or realization of a welfare state have not been satisfactory. Man muddles on with the rationality vouched for his growth. Yet it is a fact that man is in search of happiness. This happiness and peace of mind seem to be closely linked up. Man has to realize that he belongs to a great world, not only of humanity, but also of other kinds and types of life, not only on this earth of ours, but also on other worlds. Science has been opening up the frontiers of our knowledge in very vast directions. We have almost begun to enter into a greater world, but our minds are yet incapable of thinking to that scale, and indeed we are incapable of adjusting to this mortal world, and the prospects it is offering. Man feels himself to be a greater being in reality, or at least capable of realizing himself in the world and fulfilling the demands of his body, life, and mind. His efforts in this direction have been continuous, and labor of extreme concentration has gone into the struggle to grow, to live, and to realize happiness in terms of the wants of his body. It is true that some mighty minds have held that all this search for happiness in the world, by adapting the world to one's needs and happiness, cannot avail, and the precariousness of the achievement is more to be known. And the precariousness of the achievement is more to be known. True also indeed, they have counseled that in transitoriness of happiness achieved, there can be no real happiness. They have also held that the very definition of illusion is precisely transitoriness of all happiness. The search for the eternal and the permanent happiness is the real search. And this entails the renunciation of the search for the transitory happiness or success. This I feel is very important. I think the people who are interested in yoga or control of mind have to make a firm commitment to themselves to lead a simplified life, and also to not as a token gesture, but sincerely to give up all activities which will not lead you to the goal. I mean, unless you're ready to renounce what is frivolous and banal and unnecessary, it should not be a token gesture, but it's very sincere with a mental restraint. With the restraint, we should give up all unnecessary activities. Till that time, serious meditation will not begin, unless we come to that firm decision that unnecessary activities have to be given up. That is what is important. I'll read again because people take it very superficially that, it should not be a token gesture. It should be very sincere, actually. They have held that the very definition of illusion is precisely transitoriness of all happiness. The search for the eternal and the permanent happiness is the real search. And this entails the renunciation of the search for transitory happiness or success. However, man is not quite prepared for this renunciation of the transitory happiness, which according to him is in the hand, for the sake of the permanent happiness which is far off. Better the bondage of the immediate, if it is pleasant, than the freedom of the eternal, which needs renunciation of the immediate. So too, the renunciation of finiteness or individuality is impossible because of the promise of the attainment of the infinite. Surely men have sought a different solution for wish fulfillment. They would like to realize the eternal in the temporal, the infinite in the finite, the unbounded in the bounded, spirit in the bosom of matter, and so on, because of the double demand of human nature for both the worlds. There have grown several philosophies which seek to do justice to the claims of man's desires or wishes here and yonder. That philosophies are governed by such desires or wishes is a fact that reveals the psychological roots of their thinking. Such thinking has not released itself from the goal-directing impulse, and rightly too, though it must be confessed that reality is not capable of being a goal unless all happiness claim is dropped, whether it is of the temporal or the eternal order. Reality has a claim to be known for itself without the limitations and strictures of desire for any goals, such as happiness or pleasure or power. It is to be known as it is in itself and for itself. That is the law of one's real being and reality. Man feels his reality to be of paramount concern, and the realization of the reality is the basic impulse of his being, and happiness, pleasure, power, and so on are just means considered and surrendered on the march towards his own reality realization. The method by which this reality consciousness is to be attained are of great antiquity and had varying fortunes just because of man's dual aims. It is only one seeks oneself that one realizes one reality, and not when one turns to the world to realize oneself or oneself in it. Several indeed have been the philosophies that imagined or built up the systems, and they have become incapable of showing the way to the reality consciousness, nor was liberation achieved with their help. A return to the need for personal experience of the ultimate has become urgent, and most people tired of philosophies and logistics and so-called rationality are turning towards a method by which they would have the experience or intuition and realization of the essence of being or existence. There are, of course, some who do not think that experience can solve any problems and believe that belief alone in the methods or means of philosophies will be sufficient, and personal experience is merely a lure and a mirage. With such thinkers, we of course do not agree, and man has never agreed. True indeed, this personal experience should be of the highest and not merely a hallucinatory product of one's wishes and constructions, mental projections, so to speak, and not reality. Hallucination is a projection of one set of illusions in the place of those it is set to replace, namely the experience of nature. The evolution of man into a higher consciousness or reality is indeed our endeavor, and this evolution can no longer be achieved through the old patterns suitable to lower species and forms of life, including man. The growth of a cosmic consciousness or an intuition that can grasp all in one sweep of consciousness rather than in fragments, or that which will integrate all knowledge and perceive the integral reality, is a divine gift and cannot be expected to be attained through natural means of mere aspiration. Science expects this to happen in natural evolution through man's infinite capacity to adapt the environment to his needs, and also to rouse within himself powers and capacities latent in a sense, such as he has already done, such as rationality, intelligence, instinct, will, consciousness itself, and creative imagination, cooperative activity, and social unity. However, the ascent of life is marked by breaks, and one wonders whether these breaks or leaps are due to an innate force or elan, or an upward force that has leaned towards it to pull it up. Religious experience in man reveals this leaning of the cosmic consciousness or divine and transcendent grace consciousness towards it. Thus, in man, this conjunction of the divine and the human is made possible for the first time in evolution. But a jump to the ultimate consciousness or being is a long way off. And the natural evolution of man will reveal that in his life, the incidence of a force much vaster and superior to himself takes its hand. This is the beginning of spirituality. The self confronts its own deepest urge to be this urge towards the ultimate reality, without which its own future is impossible and untenable. This is the call to knowledge of the self, to fulfillment, to perfection, to ultimate happiness and bliss, and above all, to the feeling and realization of reality of oneself, which seems to be slipping away in its own original nature. The seers of India had long ago seen this necessity for the help of the highest and the ultimate spirit, for lifting man to a higher levels of consciousness and awareness, such as superconsciousness and absolute consciousness or experience. Supermind belongs to the region of the level very much above the human mental and over-mental. There are levels of being such as Pinda, Anda or Brahmanda, Parabrahmanda, and the highest transcendent, which is called by Sri Ramchandraji of Shahjahanpur as the central region, and the center. Indeed, we can reveal the parallels between these and the worlds described as Bhu, Bhuva, Swar, Maha, Jana, Tapa, and Satyam. Consciousness at each level is higher, suited to the plane of its being, and goes through modifications or twists and limitations when it descends lower, and is thus said to form these several centers or granthis or chakras that distribute the power of consciousness according to the laws of the centers, which emerge as and when the center forms. The yoga of self-realization demands, then, the approach to the highest state beyond all the levels of consciousness and being. The question arises whether this is possible, whether it is not a gradual process of ascent which enables man to proceed from the level of man to the level of the superman with the supermind, and so on till the highest level is reached. This is the second question. There is much to be said in favor of the gradual theory of evolution. The immediate possibility of arriving at the highest level is also open to the human soul that has become aware of the urgency of its attainment and existence. This is what Sri Ramchandraji assures as possible, and with the yoga directed by one who has attained that ultimate central reality, it is positively easy. Evolution of the individual becomes swift even while in the human body, which is purified by that highest consciousness or power and transformed in every one of its cells. The power of the highest can descend thus into the human heart and begin to purify and lead it to the highest state. The human frame itself is so made as to receive the transmissions of the highest energy or Shakti divine at several centers corresponding to the cosmic centers and supracosmic regions. The human body, being thus purified in its nervous, circulatory, and other systems, can enjoy or experience the peace, the power, and the transcendence even in this body. The need and process are really to be trained by an adept in this Rajayoga path. Sri Ramchandraji, in this book entitled Commentary on the 10 Commandments of Sahaj Marg, elucidates the conditions which are necessary for realizing the ultimate. They are commandments which one must follow implicitly. They are not merely orders arbitrarily given, but clearly explained in order to show their rationality in respect of the goal that has to be reached. They are, of course, easy to follow when there is the earnestness to reach the goal or the ultimate. The simple formula of prayer gives us our objective in this search. It is God who is the All-Master and who is the only person who can lead us to the destination. Our wishes interfere with our reaching the destination and are prapti virodhis, enemies of our attainment. Surrender to God, who is the power omnipotent, is the essential need, for God is both the means and the end. The master who leads us to the highest is one who is so much absorbed in the ultimate that he is, as it were, God in descent towards the soul that seeks and strives and struggles for help. The ancient methods of practice are beautifully explained, showing the rationality of worship and meditation. At the sandhyas or conjunctions of the day, morning, noon, and evening, the angas of yoga are also neatly expounded, and the natural method of spiritual adaptation and adjustment to the goal is given in a simple and straightforward manner. The purification of the system by the subtle process of transmission by the master is an achievement that can find no parallel in the spiritual history in recent times. To live in God, for God, and by God is the burden of the path of Sri Ramchandra's Rajayoga. And this naturally leads to the realization of one's reality in God, for God. So too one becomes harmonious with all without any distinctions. The higher worlds open to one who has become one with God by living in him and for him alone. Spirituality is not like religion, just a form of worship or technique of observances. It is a living in the awareness of God and in his essence. Sri Ramchandraji points out how the individual soul, by following the commandments, can even at the first contact come to experience the peace that passeth understanding, and then grow in this peace towards the highest possible to man. Liberation or moksha is something that naturally follows from this practice. Perfection too may be open to one who is divinely directed. There's a little amount of metaphysics or physics in the exposition, which is not very important to discuss, as it will become clear as one proceeds on with the abhyasa. There is no doubt that there must be complete transformation of man's nature, and it must be taken up for guidance by the cosmic and supracosmic nature, so that this attainment may be felt to be more and more reality, Sat. As one approaches the center or the ultimate, one increases in his reality, and all that went before appear to be more and more unreality. However, the abhyasi's aim is to gain this increasing reality that arises as one begins to get near the center. Sri Ramchandraji's discoveries in this realm are remarkable for their dynamic practical nature. God is not far and distant, but very near and ready. Ready means siddhopaya, and man has but to turn towards him to feel his presence and his power of transformation. We owe it to Sri Ramchandraji of Fatehgarh for making the experience possible to all, and to Sri Ramchandraji of Shahjahanpur for spreading this gospel of redemption and transformation by demonstrating it practically to whosoever turn towards him. This book is in a sense for the advanced practicant, but it is a very illuminating book which should be read after the study of Master's reality and dawn and efficacy of Rajayoga. Anything? Vivek, or kuch?
No, sir. Any questions? If anybody has, can.
What we'll do today, we will, since it's finished very early, we'll take diary saying of Babuji and then we will read that. You can put it on the screen. That will take another 10 minutes.
Okay, sir.
If anybody has got this very clear cut, I mean, it's inspiring and then inspires us to really earnestly try to practice yoga to reach the goal, actually, to live in God, for God, living in the consciousness of Master should be a sincere attempt by all abhyasis, actually.
Message of my master. Message given in September 1960. It is a great pleasure to me to deliver to you the message of a master, which is meant for the common good of all humanity. His auspicious name was Samartha Guru Mahatma Ramchandraji of Fatehgarh, UP. He is the Adi Guru of our mission. He devoted his whole life to the spiritual service of all mankind. The popular belief that the attainment of liberation is not only difficult but also impossible within the span of one's life is a mistaken notion. Who knows, this very life of ours might be the last one to bring us to the level of liberation. Indeed, our great master has boldly asserted that one can, for sure, attain liberation in this very life, nay, even in a part of it, provided one is really earnest about it and has the fortune of having a proper guide. This he has practically demonstrated in many instances, which only direct experience can prove. He advised meditation on the heart as the easiest method, and this is followed in the mission. Meditation on certain other points, such as the tip of the nose or the midpoint between the two eyebrows, as advised elsewhere, may also serve to some extent. But in my opinion, meditation on the heart is the easiest and the most efficacious. I have sufficiently dealt with this point in the efficacy of Rajayoga. We have so far been extroverts, but now we have to become introverts by turning our minds inwards. When we are successful in our efforts, we automatically begin to have spiritual experiences, and our march on the path of spirituality goes on without interruption. Other forms of sadhana may also perhaps be helpful to some extent, but this at least is quite certain that as long as we are extroverts, our eye can never turn inwards. The most helpful methods would therefore be only those which are quite simple and natural and free from all grosser effects. For acquiring that which is the subtlest beyond all possible limits, we must naturally be attracted towards means which tend to make us the lightest and the subtlest. When we want to humor a baby, we pose innocence like him. So also for realizing him, we have ourselves to become godlike. This is the message of the day.
Yeah.
I'll read on.
Yeah, we'll read.
Yeah.
Yes.
The next thing,
So I wonder what the people have written in their diaries after ruminating about this. It'll be interesting to know how the minds are reacting to this sentence. What are the interesting ways they express their feelings when they contemplate on this sentence? It'll be interesting to know actually. Anyway, we'll go.
Okay. The next thing most essential for spirituality is moderation. The word carries a vast sense. It does not pertain only to the mending of our external ways of living so as to make them agreeable to others, but it is something which covers the entire sphere of our mental and physical activities. In the opinion of our revered master, a person cannot be said to have even stepped into the field of spirituality, though he might have secured high attainments, if he lacks moderation in any respect. Moderation really means that we have entered the sphere where our restless tendencies have subsided to a great extent. Whatever remains of it then relates, however, to the condition of the region we are wandering in. There are certain granthis or knots in all regions. When the current of nature flowed down from the origin to effect creation, the jerks created knots which became centers of power. In the course of our swimming up through these currents, the knots begin to get unfolded through the power of meditation, making our advance easier and more smooth. Further, we enter the region which is purer and where the effect of granthis is greatly reduced. In this way, we go on stage by stage till we reach the point where Maya becomes almost extinct. The greatest of sages normally have had their access only up to this extent, but much remains further still. Judging it from the spiritual point of view, I may say that it is yet only the fifth circle we have covered, and 11 more remain still to be crossed. When we have crossed all the 16, we step into the central region, as I have called it in my efficacy of Rajayoga. This approach had formerly been quite unattainable by embodied souls, but by virtue of our master's wonderful discovery, one can now attain that state while in the physical body. People may not be convinced of it, but I shall say that the condition can be practically experienced if a person exerts himself for it, or if one gets a master of real caliber, who by means of transmission of the power of prana or spiritual energy can give him a glimpse of it for a moment at least. As regards bhakti, so far as my inner reading goes, I can safely say that what people generally think to be bhakti is only flattery in the real sense. In fact, real bhakti is widely different from flattery. It is simple attachment, strong and irrevocable attachment to the divine. There are, however, some who feel even the pangs of who feel even the pangs of love, as they call it, which in my opinion may more appropriately be interpreted as the pricking pain of a boil, though they might be a bit higher than the ordinary level of flattery. I call it as the pain of a boil because it is devoid of divine remembrance. That means our bhakti or attachment to God is not as it ought to be. It is short of the mark. The only cure for such a pain can be a surgical operation which might throw out the poisonous element, which if neglected might in course of time develop into a chronic ulcer beyond all possibility of cure. The toxic element is really the ungodly and the anti-spiritual matter that has accumulated in our body by the effect of bad association and environment. That brings us to the conclusion that the means we adopt for worship or meditation should be such as may manifest true love in our hearts. I'll proceed.
Yeah.
There are numerous ways for developing divine love, for which many bhavas, attitudes are resorted to, such as that of father, mother, friend, or master. But in my opinion, the conception of God as beloved is better and more convenient. If we think ourselves to be the lover and Him as the beloved, and proceed on with the same feeling, the course would be easier. The result that will follow in due course would be that God Himself shall become the lover and we the beloved. This is really the fourth stage of meditation. But if we think at this stage that we have realized the goal, it is a blunder. Much remains ahead still. But that being beyond words is related with practical experience only. By all this, I mean to emphasize the things which are most useful for further spiritual progress. But unfortunately, the standard of final attainment, nay, perfection even, has so much gone down and bhakti has become such a cheap affair that they have altogether lost their real value. Even a peculiar motion of the eye is taken as bhakti, and the experience of its effect as a high attainment, which, as I understand, is sufficient to make one a present day guru. The times have changed for the worse, making us all the more so. Degeneration has set in, diverting the minds of people from the right course. When they got completely tarnished with it, the idea of degradation began to haunt their minds. But in their state of degradation, they had accepted wrong as right, and they went on and on with it, thinking it to be the proper solution to the problems of life. They preached the same, and painting it in bright colors, they offered it to the people, inducing them to accept and follow them. Not a streak of light could, however, be traced in any of them. The sense of morality got deteriorated to the extent that discrimination between right and wrong was almost lost. Prejudice became predominant so much that picking up bitter quarrels or indulging in riotous incidents on that account is treated as a pious act, instances of which are abundant everywhere. There are some who advocated the idea of a personal God, others that of a formless God, still others that of Saguna or Nirguna, with or without attributes. There are heated discussions resulting in bitterness, which create feelings of hatred towards hatred against each other and produce causes for dissension. The supporters of both Saguna and Nirguna concepts um, the supporters of both Saguna and Nirguna concepts, though they vie so much with each other, are, in my opinion, equally in the wrong, and neither of them has thereby been able to achieve the ideal. They are really the two paths with the same, that is, common object, with realization. The only difference between them is that for those who proceed by the former, that is Saguna, and remain fixed to it, infinity ever remains out of their view. That means they have solidified the watery vapors of the air into hard icy rock. Now, if icy rock slips down into the sea, ships are likely to strike against it and get sunk. Similar shall be the fate of the advocate of Nirguna view, if he sticks to it forever thinking it to be all sufficient, perhaps with the only difference that his rock might be a little further on. Truly speaking, God is neither Saguna nor Nirguna, but beyond both. He is what he is. What should be there then be done to solve this mystery? The only possible solution can be to fix our eyes on the absolute, be it Saguna, Nirguna, or neither, and develop love for it. Now, there remains only the problem of realization. Generally, people take it to mean a mental vision of the physical form of Vishnu with four hands holding a conch, a discus, a mace, and a lotus, respectively. But in my opinion, such a type of darshana is only the result of the grosser mentality of the worshipper, for the reason that his own subtler self appears to him in that form, because he had taken up that very form for meditation. In Rajayoga, the state of mind which develops by the effect of sadhana is quite a different one. In that condition, he feels the presence of the divine force, of a divine force everywhere and in all things, and that brings him into a state of ecstasy. Such is really the true state of darshana or divine vision. Let people peep into it and experience it for themselves. The attainment of this state of darshana or vision does not mean perfection. It is only the first step towards the divine. How much more we have to go on, and how many further states we have yet to pass through, cannot, however, be exactly determined. When our final aim is merging in Bhuma or the ultimate, the state of darshana can by no means be taken as final. In a way, we are yet in a state of amusement, enjoying the effects of the condition we enter in, like a child with his new toys. If you look into it with the heart's eye, you may easily discover the reality of it. I call it amusement because, in case the Abhyasi is away from it even for a while, he feels unhappy. All that most of us do by way of worship has a sense of enjoyment behind it. Consequently, it is nothing but a source of amusement. The sources of amusement are varied. For a child, it is toys. For a learned man, the study of books. For a worshipper, practices and sadhana. For a bhakta, emotional love. For a realized soul, realization and merging. And for one perfect, his state of ignorance. But until now, all these are amusements for amusement's sake only. True reality lies still ahead when we are beyond all these stages. It is a matter of pity that people remain entangled in these amusements, thinking them to be reality, and end their pursuit with them. मिल गई जिसको गांठ हल्दी की, उसने समझा कि हूं मैं पंसारी. One who got a piece of turmeric considered himself to be a grocer. What reality can possibly be is very difficult to describe in words. For the sake of understanding, we may call it as the end of all the spiritual stages, though it may be only the beginning of reality. Further, that too disappears, and its memory also recedes to the background. Then we reach the plane where our swimming goes on infinitely. To him who might be eager to have experience of that infinite plane, I may say that he must step into it after brushing aside all the effects of feelings. All that I have said above may be very difficult to achieve by one's self-effort alone. The reason is that as we go higher and higher, the force of nature becomes subtler and subtler. And the subtler the force, the more powerful it is. Hence, the ascent by self-effort becomes very difficult. At this stage, the help and support of a worthy guide who might push the Basi up by his own force is absolutely essential. But still, in my view, in spite of being pushed up by the master's force, the risk of slipping down again does persist, unless the master's power is applied to support his stay there. Having given one of my associates a lift beyond the fourth stage of Brahman Mandal, I once made a practical examination of things by entering into the condition myself and found out that it required a period of 1,000 years to go up to the next stage by one's self effort, and for further movement 5,000. Since the spiritual stages are innumerable, the time required to traverse them is also incalculable. It is the power of Pranahuti alone that can curtail this duration and enable the course of thousands of years to be covered within the span of one's life. But the final aim too must remain in sight all through to ensure final success. If we go on pursuing our practice of sadhana without having the final aim in view, our position will be that of a traveler who travels on without any idea of a destination. The spiritual path can be discovered only when one keeps a destination ever in view. Now, what is it that keeps us firm on the path? Which is that power that pushes us onwards and helps and guides us through? It is our mind, manas, and mind alone, which is so often considered to be wicked and mean. Of course, we ourselves have spoiled its habits by making it overactive, indecisive, and vacillating. Otherwise, it is the best, the only, and the most useful instrument in us, which alone communicates to us the divine commands and all the subtle experiences of higher planes. In its spoiled state, it no doubt leads us to hallucinations, which are most often misunderstood as stages of advancement. I have come across such miserable persons, and if accidentally one happens to be somewhat interested in spiritualism, the extent of its viciousness may be incalculable, since he begins to interpret them as communion with higher souls or gods and claims to be receiving divine commands. But if the mind is brought to its purified state, it can never mislead in this way. I may here give you my own discovery about the origin of the human mind. When the time of creation came, there was a stir in the region below the center, which served as the basis of creation. It was then in its absolute state because it was the very next thing after God. The same thing appeared in man as mind, beyond which there is but God alone, the center, as I've put it in the efficacy of Rajayoga. Now imagine for a while how far, in its present state, the mind has been marred and spoilt. When it is again purified and brought to its original state, it reveals only that which is right. Mind can, however, through transmission, be brought to its original state all at once, if fortunately a master of such high caliber can be found, and if the Abhyasi too be capable of enduring the strong force of transmission. I have touched on only a few essential points, and at every step I have emphasized the importance of pranauti or transmission. The reason is that so far I have never come across a better or more effective way of progress. It is because the superior power of the master combined with our self-effort redoubles the force of progress. Besides, in this way, the over-consciousness of self-effort remains subdued and never promotes the feeling of ahamkar or pride, which often comes into the followers of grosser mechanical ways. Now, since times are changing, as I've hinted at in efficacy of Rajayoga, only such means as introduced by our revered master, Mahatma Ramchandraji, shall be in vogue throughout the world. The knowledge of the divine is a science. The power of nature which flows from the original repository in the form of knots has the capacity of both creation and destruction. The sages of India always utilized the power of creation for the reformation of humanity. The power of destruction, which exists in abundance, is also so strong that even an atom bomb is no match for it. This power too is being utilized at present for setting up a new world in place of the present one. Spiritual renaissance has already commenced, and India shall again lead the world, no matter how long a time it may take. The world will soon realize that no nation on the surface of the earth can survive without spirituality as its base. The age of diplomacy and stratagem is now passing swiftly, and by the end of the present century, remarkable changes are bound to come into being. Everyone must be prepared to gladly welcome what is destined to befall and should come to the path of spirituality, whereby alone his welfare can be assured. People have not given me a chance to serve them in this respect, though I have always been serving them to some extent, even without their knowledge. All that I have said above is in my master's message to the whole world. हजारों साल नरगिस अपनी बेनूरी पे रोती है, बड़ी मुश्किल से होता है चमन में दीदावर पैदा. For thousands of years, the eye-shaped narcissus flower weeps over its slightlessness. One with real eyes is rarely born in the garden. So we'll conclude.
Yeah, we'll conclude. We'll meet next Sunday.